Imagine Nuremberg, Bavaria, in the spring of 1828. It's Monday, May 26th. The afternoon sun begins to dim, and market-goers are packing up. Suddenly, a barefoot teenager with ragged clothes appears in the town square. He's carrying nothing but an envelope and a wild-eyed look of terror. The local shoemaker, seeing him stumble, approaches cautiously. The boy speaks in a heavy rural dialect and asks only for directions. He won't say who he is. When pressed, he can only whisper that his father was a cavalryman and that he too wants to be a cavalryman. He collapses into tears at the police station soon after, in shaky handwriting. He writes one word: Kaspar Hauser. No last name, no home, no past. This is how the legend of Kaspar Hauser begins, a mystery that would grip Europe. The boy is about 16 years old, weak but alert, able to climb stairs on his own and in good health. Yet he claims he was raised in total darkness by a stranger whom he never saw, fed only bread and water. He hands the authorities two letters, one supposedly from a poor Bavarian laborer who says he found Kaspar as an infant and raised him alone in a dark room. The other signed by a mother naming his birth date and saying his father was a trooper. Both letters claim he was meant for the cavalry but imply he's been wandering alone since 1812. Locals later note the handwriting is the same on both, and suspicious details start to add up. For instance, the officer mentioned in the letter wasn't even stationed in Nuremberg in 1812. Still, Kaspar is at first treated with compassion. When no one claims him as runaway or thief, the town treats him like a foundling. For 2 months, he lives in a tower cell at Nuremberg Castle, but this time as a city charge rather than a criminal. Visitors crowd to see him, and doctors, scholars, curious citizens bring toys and gifts, marveling at the wild child. He learns quickly. Teachers show him letters and prayers, and soon Kaspar is writing his name and even reading a bit, which astonishes everyone. He proves surprisingly sharp-minded despite claiming never to have seen a book until now. He can recite prayers and a little Bible text. In July 1828, the town of Nuremberg officially adopts Kaspar. The city council provides him a small pension and appoints a guardian. Kaspar is placed under the care of Georg Friedrich Daumer, a schoolmaster and philosopher. Daumer begins tutoring the boy at home. Under structured lessons, Kaspar flourishes. Within months, he learns to read and write fairly well, and even shows a talent for drawing and art. Observers note he has a good memory and learns foreign languages. He speaks up to 6 words of English by 1829. Daumer and others experiment on him. Some said Daumer even tried homeopathic remedies or magnetic experiments on Kaspar to learn about his extraordinary memory. Life under Daumer is not easy for Kaspar. He loves freedom, having spent so little of life in open air, and he chafes at constant supervision. Eventually Daumer grows impatient, believing Kaspar exaggerates and tells lies. But during this time, rumors about Kaspar's true identity are rampant. Some swore he is not a foundling at all but nobility in disguise. A particularly persistent theory in the salons is that he is the long-lost hereditary Prince of Baden. He is of the right age and bears some resemblance, they say, to Grand Duke Charles and his consort Stephanie, whose infant son died mysteriously in 1812. The story goes that scheming relatives spirited the real baby away and substituted another, waiting until this unknown child could reappear as a claimant to the throne. Kaspar's sudden appearance in Nuremberg fits the timeline. Maybe he is that princely boy after all. The nobility take note. Even the Bavarian King Ludwig I takes an interest, fearing political intrigue. He orders Kaspar kept under 24-hour guard for his safety. But many remain skeptical. Naysayers point out how improbable Kaspar's tale seems. Could a boy have really lived 16 years in a cramped dark cell and emerged at once so alert and healthy? He shows no signs of rickets or vitamin D deficiency that strict isolation should cause. In fact, doctors observe his teeth and bones are normal. Strangely, records surface noting Kaspar carries a cowpox vaccination scar on his arm, a sign he visited a doctor as a child. At that time, Bavaria required all children to be vaccinated. If Kaspar truly had spent his youth alone, who took him for that inoculation? And why did he speak fluent Bavarian dialect of the region? These facts quietly undermine his self-descriptions, but public fascination only grows. In the summer of 1829, Kaspar becomes something of a celebrity. Newspapers and pamphleteers across Germany and even in England and France write about the Nuremberg foundling. Writers debate whether he is a genuine innocent with no upbringing, or a cunning impostor playing the long con. Artists and writers spread the tale in books and plays. The idea of a mysterious child raised without human contact has allure. Kaspar is called the child of Europe. Meanwhile, Kaspar himself basks in attention at times. He starts to carry himself with a princely pride, enjoying the flattery. Yet the novelty can be exhausting. People who once treated him as gentle-hearted begin to grumble that he is lazy and vain. Then things turn dark. On October 17, 1829, a horrifying event shatters the uneasy calm. Late one afternoon in Daumer's house, Kaspar is found in the cellar bleeding from a deep slash on his forehead. He's barely conscious. He claims a hooded man attacked him in the yard, slashing at his head and warning, "You must die before you leave the city." According to Kaspar, he saw the attacker flee and recognized his voice. It was the very same man who had held him captive as a child. The police are called, and a frightened Kaspar is bundled off to a safer location under guard. But when investigators examine Daumer's house, they find no sign of an intruder. No footprints, no broken lock, nothing to suggest anyone could have gotten in and noticed. Instead, a sharp-eyed doctor notes the wound's odd shape. It could have been self-inflicted with a razor. Kaspar has, in fact, had a bitter row with Daumer earlier that day over his studies. Critics whisper that the bruised boy might have staged the attack to draw sympathy and escape Daumer's lectures. Daumer himself grows convinced of this. In a letter he writes that Kaspar Hauser's nature has lost much of its original purity, accusing the boy of lying and deceit, whether self-inflicted or not. The incident ends Kaspar's time with Daumer. Nuremberg moves him to a new home for supervision. Just 6 months later, another incident strains his reputation. On April 30, 1830, Kaspar is living with a local merchant family, the Biberbachs, under police watch. One day after a loud argument, a shot rings out in the house. Kaspar is found with a shallow wound on the right side of his head, bleeding onto the floor. He insists the pistol on the wall fell down and went off by accident as he reached for books. But by now his caretakers are sick of excuses. The head injury is too clean to be a real gunshot, and Kaspar has again been caught lying. The Biberbachs demand they no longer host this troublesome charge. The town's leaders shuffle Kaspar yet again. He's briefly returned to another patron, Baron von Tucker, but even the nobles grow irritated. In mid-1830 they decide to look for powerful friends abroad who might sponsor him. 2 years of unwanted semi-freedom are over. Meanwhile, rumors and speculation take on international flavor. Some say Kaspar once spoke a few words of Hungarian and dreamed of a countess motherland. The adventurous among Europe's upper crust pick up the story. In 1831, an English aristocrat, Lord Philip Stanhope, becomes fascinated by the case. A well-traveled lord who likes mysteries, Stanhope offers to be Kaspar's patron. He provides money for the boy's upkeep and pledges to take him to England someday, hoping to verify any clues. To jog Kaspar's memory of Hungary, Stanhope even travels there twice with him. Perhaps Kaspar will recognize places from his own past, but in Hungary nothing clicks. Kaspar doesn't know the language, doesn't identify any landscapes or palaces. Even aristocrats Kaspar meets say he behaves theatrically, as if putting on a show. One Hungarian nobleman later confessed he and his son had laughed at Kaspar's stories over dinner. After these fruitless trips, Lord Stanhope begins to doubt. He can't ignore how Kaspar fell into arguments and fabrication yet again. By the end of 1831, Stanhope privately concedes he may have been deceived. Needing a stable home, Kaspar is next sent to Ansbach 2 hours east. In January 1830, Lord Stanhope arranges for a trusted schoolmaster, Johann Georg Meyer, to oversee Kaspar's education. The great law scholar Anselm Feuerbach, brother of the philosopher, also takes an interest. At first, Kaspar is given a pleasant role copying legal documents. He clings to the hope that Lord Stanhope will one day bring him to England. He even begins claiming he is the son of a Hungarian countess and pleading to travel. But this new life is no fairy tale. Professor Meyer is strict and often scolds Kaspar for laziness. By late 1833, Kaspar is working as a clerk in a local office, yet still disgruntled. He grows convinced Stanhope's promise has failed, and that the kind Englishman may never return for him. Tensions flare. On the evening of December 9, 1833, Kaspar and Meyer have a harsh argument. Kaspar is distraught by thoughts of confronting Stanhope the following week. He stomps away in despair. 5 days later, on December 14th, Kaspar stumbles back into Meyer's home in agony. There's a deep stab wound in his chest. Weakly, he whispers that a stranger in the court gardens had lured him with a promise of money, a violet purse allegedly full of coins, and stabbed him as he reached for it. He can only tell Meyer, the Hofgarten man had a knife, gave bag, stabbed, ran as hard as I could. Doctors rush to help, but Kaspar's condition deteriorates by the hour. In his delirium, he speaks of a pencil or possibly a note. He never clearly names his assailant. Police search of the court gardens yields one clue. A small purple purse is found in the brush, wrapped around a penciled note written backwards, mirror writing. It reads cryptically, roughly translated, "Hauser will be able to tell you quite precisely how I look and from where I am. To save Hauser the effort, I want to tell you myself from where I come. I come from the Bavarian border, on the river. I will even tell you the name Himmel. The note is incomplete and full of blanks. It ends with the initials ML. No further identification is given." The purse and note raise more questions than answers. Kaspar Hauser dies 3 days later on December 17, 1833. He was just 21. At the ensuing inquest, investigators are baffled. How could this elderly intrigue of his life end on such a quiet Sunday evening in a small German town? Some doctors point out the wound's peculiarities. It seems consistent with a self-inflicted thrust rather than a furious attack. One physician notes the fatal cut was almost transverse, as if Kaspar had plunged the knife into his own chest and turned it. No knife is ever found. A majority of experts eventually conclude that there was no assassin. Kaspar must have stabbed himself, perhaps rehearsing another sensational story for attention, only by some tragic misjudgment bleeding to death. Others strongly disagree, believing someone did murder him, perhaps to seal the Prince of Baden conspiracy once and for all. Lord Stanhope, who had eagerly followed Kaspar's fate from afar, sides with the suicide theory. He later publishes a harshly critical pamphlet admitting he was duped. Stanhope says ruefully that he might be the only man that ever wrote a book to prove himself in the wrong. Kaspar's former guardians, like Daumer, are outraged. Daumer even writes a book accusing Stanhope of orchestrating an assassination. Stanhope's daughter, years later, defends her father's innocence in a memoir. The controversy rumbles on in pamphlets and newspapers. Each camp accuses the other of covering up the truth. In Ansbach they lay Kaspar to rest in the city cemetery. His headstone bears a solemn Latin epitaph, Hic jacet Kasparus Hauser, enigma sui temporis nota nati vitas, occultumers 1833. In English, here lies Kaspar Hauser, enigma of his time. Unknown birth, mysterious death. So, who was Kaspar Hauser? Scholars and scientists have dissected every scrap of evidence over the past 2 centuries, yet his identity remains unsolved. Let's review the main theories. Lost Prince theory. For decades the favorite legend was that Kaspar was the true grandson of the Grand Duke of Baden, hidden away at birth. But by the late 1800s, historians unearthed baptismal records, autopsies, and family letters proving the Baden prince was duly baptized, lived for weeks, and died in 1812. In 1876, Otto Mittelstadt published official court documents demolishing the White Lady ghost story. Those findings convinced many that the grand conspiracy was a fanciful fairy tale. Then modern DNA testing sealed it. In 1996, a lab compared blood from Kaspar's clothing to the Baden line. No match was found in 2024. An even more precise mitochondrial DNA study definitively ruled out a maternal link to any Baden pry. NCSS. The royal connection is now considered firmly debunked. Impostor/fraud theory. A strong school of thought holds that Kaspar was never kidnapped or royal at all, but an intelligent loner who invented his story out of desperation or for attention. Doctors Who. Knew him said he was too well-nourished and too quick learning to have lived locked away. Psychologists later labeled him a pathological liar. Psychiatrist Carl Leonhardt called him a pathological swindler and hysterical, able to act convincingly but prone to grand-told stories that changed under questioning. The letters he carried were likely forged after the fact. One analyst noted that the letter to the cavalry captain claimed to be written in 1812, yet that officer wasn't even in Nuremberg then. The repeated assassination attempts suspiciously came on days he was reprimanded. Even the final attack had oddities. Kaspar may have cut the note himself, as it was folded in his usual style and contained his signature spelling mistakes. Many modern investigators find it most plausible that Kaspar stabbed himself that last time. If he was a bit mentally disturbed, a kind of Munchausen syndrome by proxy directed outward, perhaps he dramatized his wounds to revive a fading public interest. One 1928 study asserted Kaspar accidentally stabbed himself too deeply while trying to fake a head. Linnea 2005 Forensic Review likewise said that while homicide cannot be ruled out, it seems unlikely an unknown killer was involved in all this. Kaspar lied repeatedly about his cell story. He would have suffered bone deformities had it been true, but he did not. The tally of oddities leans many to the view that Kaspar was the architect of his own myth, outsmarting even himself until the very end. Abandoned orphan theory. Some think Kaspar was simply an ordinary orphan or abandoned child, not a prince. Perhaps a poor Bavarian farmer or stable hand had his family ties and then placed him out in the woods, eventually writing up a dramatic tale to explain the boy's ignorance. If Kaspar was truly born around 1812, he might have lost his parents and was cared for by unknown peasants when he wandered off or was turned loose at age 16. He had no story except that dark legend, essentially. This theory says Kaspar was a desolate foster child who either unconsciously believed he'd been captive or creatively embellished his situation to find identity. Unlike the grand conspiracy idea, this view doesn't involve royal kidnapping or murder, just a lonely boy who grew up mistreated and then collapsed into melodrama. Pawn of others theory. A more conspiratorial idea suggests Kaspar was used by some powerful people as a political pawn. For example, at the time Bavaria and Baden had dynastic tensions, and fomenting a scare about a stolen prince could embarrass rulers. Perhaps Kaspar's tale was whispered into existence by those who would profit from scandal, the threat to King Ludwig's peace, or to the Baden succession. Some original followers even alleged that Lord Stanhope himself had secret ties to Baden and set Kaspar up to stir trouble. Others accused Kaspar's guardians of refusing to admit they were deceived, so they surreptitiously kept the mystery alive for fame. In any case, there's no smoking gun linking Kaspar to a larger plot, but the idea that someone was pulling strings behind the scenes continues to intrigue conspiracy buffs. On top of all the stories, we do have hard evidence to consider. The original police and court documents are preserved, as are Kaspar's own diary-like writings, some of which may have been ghostwritten. Medical reports from his 1833 autopsy remain. Those records show his brain and heart were examined. One doctor thought Kaspar's brain was oddly underdeveloped, but another found no physical anomaly. Contemporary physicians could find no bruises or fractures from the alleged stabbings, only razor and bullet abrasions. Notably, nothing in his reports described the physical damage one would expect from lifelong confinement. A recent 2023 medical study highlights one revealing detail from Kaspar's original case files. By law, his arm was vaccinated against smallpox. In fact, the mayor's July 1828 decree mentioned he speaks the Bavarian dialect and is vaccinated on the right arm. This means a servant had taken baby Kaspar to a doctor or clinic for inoculation. Hardly the act of a child kept in a dungeon. Moreover, at that time Baden hadn't even implemented smallpox vaccination yet, so the vaccination scar suggests he grew up in Bavaria, not with the Baden royals. And then, crucially, science has answered one of the oldest questions. In 2024, a team led by Professor Turi King, the same genetic sleuth who helped identify King Richard III, analyzed tiny DNA fragments from Kaspar's surviving belongings. Their results are clear. The mitochondrial DNA from Kaspar Hauser does not match the Baden-Ducal line. In simple terms, Kaspar cannot be the Grand Ducal Prince from the mother's side. This fits the 1996 study by Der Spiegel, which likewise found no genetic link when comparing Kaspar's blood stain to the Baden family. Modern forensics have at last laid to rest the royal identification question. So in the court of history, who did Kaspar turn out to be? We have eliminated kings, but not every idea has been resolved. The smallpox vaccination note and lack of sun deprivation disease strongly discredit his confinement tale. The DNA cuts the hidden prince theory. What remains is the very mystery itself. Many historians and experts today lean toward Kaspar being a complicated loner, intelligent and perhaps mentally unstable, who wove an elaborate lie. They point out how skillfully he created drama at every step. Each attack conveniently happened after scolding, each letter read like a novel, each translation or journey went just badly enough. They say it reads like a hoax written in real time. Even so, other scholars caution not to be too harsh. Kaspar was evidently abused or neglected as a child. He bore scars on his body suggesting early beatings. He was vulnerable and traumatized. Some argue that even if he embellished, the core of his story that he was hidden and hurt might still be true in some form. After all, who else could explain a barefoot boy showing up with such a story? The lack of a biological family and the constant drama hint at real pain behind the lies. Others note that if he really wanted a better life, why not simply ask someone at the outset? Instead, Kaspar kept silent about everything but his fanciful claims, suggesting maybe he felt loyalty or fear toward whoever raised him. We simply don't know, and Kaspar took his secret to the grave. In the end, Kaspar Hauser himself is gone, but his story lives on. He became a byword for the mystery of human nature, how much of us comes from blood and birth, and how much from imagination and need. Artists and writers have been fascinated by Kaspar ever since. Werner Herzog's 1974 film The Enigma of Kaspar Hauser depicts him as a silent innocent crushed by society's rational demands. Georg Trakl wrote an eerie poem about him. Suzanne Vega even sang about how he might have felt stepping into the light from darkness. His name appears in psychiatric case studies and children's moral fables. Perhaps the best way to summarize Kaspar Hauser's tale is to quote the man who inscribed his grave. An enigma, a riddle for his age. On his headstone are carved the chilling words in Latin for unknown birth, mysterious death. After nearly 200 years, this open-ended sentence still has all the truth. We may never know who Kaspar Hauser really was, a fraud, an orphan, a pawn, or something else entirely. All we have are fragments of a life that reads like myth. And so the mystery endures, provoking our questions long after its answers disappeared.